Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. Sometimes a composition can be helped by a selective focus to guide the viewer to an interesting part of the subject. This can be tricky to achieve, but with the right technique it's possible to twist the plane of focus and control sharpness in all directions. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so this is what I've got set up so far. So I've got some bread here, which I've placed on this rather rustic tabletop, and I've just placed this white tea towel underneath them, which will just give a bit more reflection of any light which I use. So for the light for this, as this has lots of texture in it anyway, what I want to do is light this in a very soft manner. So for that I'm going to use this 3-foot octabox which I've got on this C-stand. So there we are, I'll put that in position and I'll just put that up in the air a little and swing it over the top of the subject. Something like that. There we are. That'll do to start with. I think it may well need adjusting, but it's that sort of position that I'm looking for. So most of the actual softbox is behind the subject. And right at the very back here I have a black flag just to form the very background of the composition. So the camera. I'm going to use this medium format camera, but I'm not actually going to use all of it. The only part of this that I'm actually going to use is the back. So unlike a mirrorless camera or a DSLR, I can actually remove the sensor from this and just use the sensor instead of having to use the whole camera. So I'm going to use this medium format sensor on a 5x4 technical camera. So this is a Cinar P2 5.4 technical camera. Now I'm going to be using this because it has the ability to move the lens plane and move the film plane or sensor plane, if you like. And it's that movement which I'll use to selectively focus the image. I'll show you what I mean a bit later on. So for this as it is at the moment, on the front of this I have a 150mm Schneider APO lens, and that will give me a field of view which is roughly the equivalent of 90mm on a full frame format camera. Okay, so what I'm going to do is set this up so that we're pointing more or less at the subject. Now at the moment on the back of this camera I have a ground glass screen. So back in the days of film, this is the way that this sort of camera would be used. You would focus on this ground glass screen at the back, and then when you're ready to take the picture, you can open this up and slide in what's called a dark slide, which would contain the actual film emulsion itself. But we're not going to do that. What I'm going to do is use the ground glass screen just to roughly set up the image, and then I'll swap this out for an adapter like this one, and then on this I can mount the digital back, and it's that digital back which will capture the image. And you can see from this that this is the sort of surface area that I get on the medium format digital back. So this is 6 centimeters by 4.5 centimeters. Okay, so just looking at the back of the camera, I've turned the modeling light on the studio head, and what I can do is just tilt the camera down and you should be able to see the image on the back of the screen there as I move the camera into position. And I'll just take it over slightly to one side just to center it up. Something like that. And you should be able to see that I can focus the camera by moving the back plane backwards and forwards, like so. So we'll get a rough focus about there. Okay, So with that something like set, the next thing to do would be just to swap out the back. So I'll just take that part off and I'll just replace it with this adapter. There we are. So with that done, next thing to do would just be to take the sensor off the camera, and this I will now place on the back here. What I can do now is use the Capture One software that I have on this PC in conjunction with this back, so that I can read out the image, and I can use live view through this as well to actually fine-tune the picture that I'll be taking. Okay, so I'll get all that set up. There we are. So this is all plugged in and turned on now, and on the screen here I can show the controls that I have on the camera. So at the moment you can see that the ISO is set to 100 and I don't have any other controls. That's because the rest of this control is done through the lens on the front of the camera. Now this has a shutter and aperture all built into it. So at the moment it's wide open, so I can close that down and then activate the shutter like so. There you go. You might be able to see that. So I have the shutter at the moment on this lens set to 1/250th of a second. And you can see the aperture at the top here, and I can adjust that as necessary. Okay. So we'll just pop that back on the front of the camera again. And now I can use live view on the screen here just to show me what is going on. So if I just start that up, there we are. I'll make that a little bigger. And this is a live picture from the back. So if I put my hand in front of it, for instance, you can see that. Okay, so the first thing to do is to have a look at the focus. So what I can do is just move in a little into the image. And then using the focus control on the camera, you can see I can change the focus to where I need it. So at the moment I'm just going to focus on the loaf at the front there. Okay, so with that done, shut that down. And to activate the camera, when the shutter activates at the front here, I just need to add this cable. So this just goes into the PC socket on the front of the lens and just plugs into the camera at the back here. There we are. So I'll just set up the lens. So with all that now prepared, next thing to do would just be to do a test. So I'll just ready the camera and fire the shutter. And then this should transmit the image to the computer. And you can see that at those settings, I've got a bit of an image here on the screen. So there is some contamination at that setting. So what I can do is change the aperture to something more reasonable, such as say f8, and we can change the shutter speed as well. So I'll take that up to 500th of a second, which is the maximum for this particular lens. So with those changes made, I will just grab that again. And there you can see there is very little image to speak of. So now we're ready to set up the flash. So the first thing I've had to do is add this flash sync trigger. As I'm using the PC socket on the lens, I can use the PC socket on the camera back here to actually synchronize the flash with the camera. So with all that in place, just at an arbitrary energy level on the flash, what I can do is grab an image and fire the flash. There we are. So perhaps a little bright at that energy level. All this is getting a little washed out. So it probably needs to come down by at least a stop. Okay, so I've taken a stop out of the energy of the light, and I've also added this cable release to the lens just to make it a little easier to manipulate. So, and grab that again. Yes, that's looking considerably better. We've got some detail in this cloth now. It's possibly still a little bright, so what I might do is just take maybe half a stop off and do that again. There we go. So that's got some further detail in here. So this was the original exposure, then I took a stop off, then we took another half stop off. Okay, so you can see in this image, especially if I zoom in, that we have a flat field of focus. The focus is exactly the same right across the subject, from side to side. Now that's not really what I want. What I want to do is selectively focus on just this area, and that should guide the viewer into an interesting part of the composition. Now the way I can do that is by making use of the swing function. By adjusting this control, I can swing the whole lens plane in either direction relative to the film plane at the back. So to show what happens to the image while you do that, I can use live view again. So if we just start that up, just make that a bit bigger. So if I now just adjust that control, whilst trying to keep the focusing something like the same, I've created a zone of focus which is running along the cut face of the bread. So with that set up, I can now just dispense with live view. We'll have a little look at what I've done to the camera. If you trace the angle of the cut of the bread and the lens plane and the sensor plane, they all meet at one point. And that's the basis of this technique really. So with all this now twisted, what I can do is we'll just cock the shutter on the lens, wake up the camera, and grab that image. There we are. So you should be able to see immediately in this that the edges are now way out of focus, and the only part which is actually in focus is a plane which is running through here, which is exactly what we want. So this is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. Okay, so you should be able to see that with this technique you can place the point of focus wherever you like in 3 dimensions within the subject, which is quite handy from time to time. Okay, so with that captured, the next thing to do would just be to go into Photoshop and do the bare minimum of post-production. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and I've loaded up the file of the image that I captured earlier. So the first thing to do would be, as usual, just to make a copy of this. So I'll just go onto the background layer here, right-click the mouse, ask for a duplicate layer, but ask for a new document. I will just call it bread. Just click on OK, and Photoshop will make me a new document, so I can close down the camera original. I've always got that to go back to. Okay, so what do we need to do to this? Well, actually not a lot, I think. The first thing that I'm going to have a look at doing is actually having a crop. Now I'm going to use this for video, so I'm using a specific ratio of 16:9. But really I'm not going to do a great deal to it at all. Just move it up in the frame slightly, something like that. There we are, that will do, thank you very much. Good, and I think I just want to darken down the corners a bit, so I'm just going to add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to use levels adjustment. I'm just going to take that down globally, and maybe just increase the contrast a little as well, something like that. There we are. Now just paint onto the mask for that layer, in black. So I'll just make sure that black is selected as foreground color. We'll pick a paintbrush and we'll make that quite large and very soft. Okay. So now I'll just paint onto this just to bring that through like so. So there we go. So that's with that effect and that's without it. And there we have it. So by using a tilt swing technique in the camera, I've been able to move the plane of focus to match the subject. And that can give a very striking result, as you can see in this image. And I think overall, that's worked rather well. Okay, well I hope you like watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.